He threw his wife out of the house for one reason, because she wasn't beautiful enough. But what he didn't know was that the woman crying today would be the one to destroy his entire empire tomorrow. 98% of you watch but don't subscribe, but it's completely free and gives us the motivation to bring you more real-life stories like this. So hit that subscribe button and be part of this journey. He had everything: money, power, and a reputation that made people whisper his name with envy. Khalid al-Farsi, one of the richest men in the Middle East, a self-made millionaire who believed the world revolved around his desires. He drove the most expensive cars, wore designer suits, and surrounded himself with only the finest things in life. And to him, his wife was just another thing, a trophy meant to be admired, displayed, and flaunted. But there was one problem. In his eyes, she wasn't beautiful enough. Not beautiful enough to be on his arm at grand events. Not beautiful enough to match his luxurious lifestyle. Not beautiful enough to satisfy his oversized ego. Amina, his wife, had married him out of love. She didn't care about his money. She didn't care about the diamonds or the mansion. She saw a man, not a millionaire. But for Khalid, she was a mistake. And one evening, that mistake had to be corrected. They sat in their grand dining hall, where a crystal chandelier hung above like a crown of wealth. The table was covered with exotic dishes from the world's best chefs, food so expensive that one bite could feed a poor family for a week. And yet, he wasn't happy. He put down his fork, looked at Amina, and sighed as if he had endured enough. "Amina," he said coldly, swirling his wineglass, "I think we need to talk." Amina looked up, her heart skipping a beat. "Yes?" she asked, wiping her hands on a napkin, hoping this wasn't another one of his mood swings. He stared at her, his eyes scanning her face as if he was evaluating a bad business deal. "Look at you," he scoffed, shaking his head. "I mean, really look at yourself." Amina blinked. "What do you mean?" "You don't belong in my world," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I go to parties with billionaires, surrounded by stunning women, and then there's you. Plain, boring, embarrassing." Boom. Just like that, her heart shattered into a million pieces. She felt the blood drain from her face. She could barely breathe. Was this a joke? A cruel, twisted joke? I, I'm your wife, Khalid." Her voice trembled. "I have always been by your side, supported you, loved you." He raised a hand, cutting her off. "Love? Love doesn't buy success, Amina. Love doesn't make people respect me, and love definitely doesn't make you beautiful." Her fingers curled into fists beneath the table, but she held back the tears burning in her eyes. "You want a supermodel, not a wife," she whispered. Khalid smirked. "Exactly. And let's be honest, Amina, you should have seen this coming." The coldness in his voice was enough to freeze the entire room. Amina's heart screamed, but her lips stayed silent. And then he delivered the final blow. "I'm divorcing you." Silence. The walls of the mansion suddenly felt smaller. The air felt thicker. She could hear the sound of her own heartbeat thumping in her ears. You're what?" she barely managed to say. Khalid sighed as if this conversation was a waste of his time. "It's already done. The papers are ready. You will leave tonight." Tonight. Her world had just collapsed in seconds, and he expected her to pack up and leave like an unwanted guest. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to remain calm. "Where will I go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged. "Not my problem. Take whatever's yours and get out." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Whatever's mine. Khalid, I have nothing. You made sure of that." And she was right. She had no money, no career, no family to turn to. She had given everything to this marriage, sacrificed her dreams so he could build his empire. But now, she was nothing in his eyes. She sat there staring at the man she once loved, wondering when he had become this monster. Or maybe he had always been one. Minutes later, a butler arrived with her suitcase, the same suitcase she had brought when she first moved in as a young, hopeful bride. Except now it was filled with broken dreams. Khalid stood at the grand entrance, watching as she walked toward the door. His arms crossed, expression blank, like she was just another servant being dismissed. As she stepped outside, the cold night air hit her like a slap. She turned around one last time, looking at the golden gates of the mansion, at the life she was leaving behind. And that's when Khalid spoke his final, heartless words. I hope you find someone at your level, Amina. Maybe a taxi driver or a clerk. That's where you belong. The guards shut the gates behind her. And just like that, she was erased from his world. Amina stood there, clutching her suitcase, fighting back the humiliation. The street was empty. The city was alive with lights, luxury cars, and music from rooftop parties. But she had nowhere to go. She took a deep breath, staring at the dark sky above. One day, she whispered, one day you will regret this. Little did she know, that day was coming sooner than anyone could have imagined. 98% of you are watching, but haven't subscribed yet. Come on, it's completely free, and it gives us the motivation to bring you more real-life stories like this. So hit that subscribe button now and be part of this incredible journey. She was gone, erased, forgotten. Khalid didn't spare her a second thought. Why would he? In his mind, Amina was a closed chapter, a mistake corrected. But life has a funny way of proving people wrong. Because while Khalid was busy parading his new model girlfriends, showing off his wealth, and living without a single care in the world, Amina was fighting to survive. The first night was the hardest. She sat alone at a bus stop, her suitcase beside her, staring at the empty streets. She had no home, no money, no one to call. The city that once felt familiar now felt like a prison without walls. Her mind raced. Where do I go? What do I do? She could go back to her family's village, but that would mean defeat. It would mean proving Khalid right, that she was nothing without him, and that was not an option. The next morning, she walked into a local cafe, her stomach growling, her head pounding from a sleepless night. She had never worked a day in her life. Khalid made sure of that. But now, she had no choice. She approached the manager. I need a job. The woman behind the counter looked her up and down. Amina still carried herself with grace, with poise, but her clothes, once designer, were now wrinkled. Do you have experience? The manager asked. Amina shook her head. Number. But I'll do anything. The woman sighed. We're not hiring. Rejection, again. But this time, Amina didn't cry. She didn't break down. She walked out, took a deep breath, and went to the next shop. And the next, and the next. By the 15th rejection, her feet were aching, her body drained. But then, finally, a small bookstore took a chance on her. It was nothing glamorous, the pay was low, but it was a start. And Amina, she threw herself into the work. She mopped floors, stacked books, handled customers, things she had never done before. But instead of feeling humiliated, she felt something else. Freedom. For the first time in her life, she was building something of her own. Months passed. While Khalid was busy hosting yacht parties, Amina was learning. Between shifts, she read business books, studied finance, and took online courses at night. She watched how customers behaved, how businesses grew, how money moved in the real world. And then, she had an idea. She noticed a gap. Small businesses struggling to market themselves, drowning in competition. What if she helped them? She pitched her first client, a tiny clothing store struggling to make sales. Give me 1 month, she said. If I don't double your customers, you don't pay me. The owner agreed. And Amina? She poured her soul into it. She created ads, revamped their social media, and used every marketing trick she had studied in secret. By the end of the month, sales tripled. The owner was shocked. And just like that, Amina's first business was born. Word spread. More small businesses started calling. She took bigger risks, made smarter moves, and within 2 years, she had her own agency. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. The same woman Khalid had once thrown out like trash was now running meetings with CEOs, signing million-dollar deals, and building an empire of her own. She transformed, not just financially, but mentally. She was no longer the helpless wife Khalid had abandoned. She was a businesswoman, a leader, a force to be reckoned with. And then something happened that no one saw coming. Her company received a proposal, a request to acquire a failing business, a business that was oddly familiar. She looked at the name. Khalid Enterprises, her ex-husband's company. The same man who once called her worthless was now begging for help. A smirk crossed her lips. Khalid, she whispered, you have no idea what's coming. Amina sat in her corner office, the view of the city stretching endlessly before her. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek designer furniture, and a team of employees who looked to her for leadership. It was funny. Years ago, she had walked out of Khalid's mansion with nothing. Now, she owned an empire bigger than his. And fate? Oh, fate had a twisted sense of humor, because on her desk sat a proposal, a desperate request from none other than Khalid Enterprises. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Profits had plummeted, investors had pulled out, and Khalid, Mr. Untouchable Millionaire, was drowning in debt. And now, he needed her. Oh, how the tables had turned. Amina didn't respond immediately. Number she let Khalid wait, just like he had made her wait for his approval, his affection, his so-called love. But after a few days, she called a meeting with him. The stage was set, a grand conference room, a long mahogany table, polished to perfection. Amina sat at the head, her expression unreadable. The doors swung open, and there he was. Khalid. But not the Khalid she remembered. Gone was the arrogant, all-powerful businessman, the man who had once sat in luxury, sipping the finest wine while dismissing her like trash. Now, he looked small. His suit wasn't as crisp. His posture wasn't as proud. His confidence? Shattered. And when his eyes landed on her, he froze. Amina. His voice was barely above a whisper. He was in disbelief. The last time he had seen her, she was begging him for mercy. Now, she was sitting on a throne he could never reach again. A smirk tugged at her lips. Please, have a seat, Mr. Khalid. The formal tone stung. He swallowed his pride and sat down. He was desperate. He had no choice. I assume you've reviewed our proposal, Khalid started, his voice carefully measured. Khalid Enterprises is in a temporary setback, but with the right investor, Amina held up a hand, cutting him off. Let me stop you right there, she said, tilting her head. A setback? That's a cute way of saying your empire is crumbling. Khalid clenched his jaw, but he didn't deny it. She leaned forward. You built your success by stepping on people, Khalid, using them, discarding them when they were no longer convenient. Her eyes narrowed. Tell me, how does it feel to be the one discarded now? Silence. Khalid's fingers curled into fists, but he stayed quiet. Because what could he say? She was right. So tell me, she continued, tapping her manicured fingers on the table, why should I save you? Khalid hesitated. He had never begged before, never had to, but now he had no choice. Amina, I was wrong. His voice cracked slightly. I treated you unfairly. I made a mistake. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. A mistake, she repeated. Kicking your wife out because she wasn't beautiful enough was a mistake? Khalid winced. He looked down, ashamed. For the first time in his life, he had to face his own reflection. I was a fool, he admitted. I let my arrogance blind me. But I know better now. Please, Amina, you have the power to turn this around. She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. You're right about one thing, Khalid. She smiled, a knowing, dangerous smile. I do have the power now. A flicker of hope crossed his face. But then, she stood up. And I choose to walk away. Khalid's breath caught in his throat. Whoa, what? Amina straightened her blazer, looking down at him like he was nothing. I could save you, but why would I? You didn't just throw me out of your house, Khalid. You threw me out of your life like I was disposable. You made me feel worthless. Her eyes hardened. But look at me now. She leaned in just enough for her words to sting. I was never worthless, Khalid. You were just too blind to see my value. She turned on her heels, walking towards the door. Khalid shot up from his chair. Amina, wait! We can fix this! She stopped. Fix this? She repeated, shaking her head. You know, it's funny. That's exactly what I used to think about you. She turned slightly, just enough for him to see the final, victorious smirk on her face. Goodbye, Khalid. And with that, she walked away, leaving him sitting there, defeated, broken, and drowning in the consequences of his own arrogance. She never looked back, because she didn't need to. She had won. As Amina walked out of that boardroom, she didn't feel anger. She didn't feel regret. She felt power, the kind of power that Khalid once held over her. But now it belonged to her. He had spent his life believing money was everything, that beauty defined worth, that people were disposable. But now, he had nothing. And the woman he had thrown away like trash, she had everything. Khalid sat in that empty boardroom, staring at the contract she refused to sign. He had been so sure she would help him, that she would still care. But Amina had moved on. She had built her own empire. And the best revenge? She didn't need to destroy him. He had already destroyed himself. Meanwhile, Amina walked into her penthouse office, the skyline of Dubai stretching before her. Her assistant walked in. Ma'am, should I file away the Khalid Enterprises proposal? Amina smiled. No need. They won't be around much longer. She took a deep breath, looking out at the city that had once made her feel small. Now, she owned it, and she did it all without him. The best revenge is success. And Amina? She had already won. If you watched till the end, you're officially a legend. But guess what? 98% of you still haven't subscribed. It's completely free and helps us bring you more real-life stories like this. So hit that subscribe button now and join us for the next incredible story.